to be interpreters, not translators.
Did just take a picture.
That's great job. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you. We only have an hour, so let's get going. Isn't it incredible we're going to go up in satellites? You and me. I think we can make it happen. And the first thing before we go into satellite, now you've seen my new jacket, and I'm going to take it off, okay? Just a little while ago, about 6 or 7 months ago, one of my neighbors told me of a little church near my home where they said beautiful spiritual things went on and they wanted me to go and experience it with them. So I told them I'd love to, and we went there, and no sooner we opened the door of this little church and everybody reached out for me and they took my hand and they pet my shoulder and they felt my hair. It was an absolute freak out right at the door, you know. And then they brought me in and there was a lot of singing and a lot of moving around and dancing, and it was a real celebration, sort of the kind of religious experience that some of us really think about and dream about but don't very often experience. But the high point came when the minister stood up and he said, friends, he said, Brother Jonathan is going to give the sermon today, and his subject is going to be faith. And so I sat back ready to hear this, and little brother Jonathan stood up, and he was about 5'4", and he had no hair, and he had two beady, wonderful, criss-kringle eyes, and he stood before everybody for a minute like this, and then he folded his hands, and he said, faith, 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 faith. And then he sat down. And the minister stood up, and with a big smile on his face, he said, thank you, Brother Jonathan, for that beautiful lecture on faith. And I thought, you know, someday I'm going to wise up, and when I go to talk to people like I am tonight about love, I'm going to fold my hands, and I'm going to say, love, 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 love. And then I'm going to go home. And it'll be the most beautiful evening we've had. You know, you can stand up and say, oh, that Pascal really knows his way around love. But you know, I'm not that secure yet. And so I'm going to spend an hour telling you what this man said in a minute. But you know, the reason is that I'm really concerned about the fact that we all need this thing so much and crave this thing so much, and so little of it is seen around. And so maybe we do have to talk a little bit about it. And one of the times that this idea of our being lost and away from love came years and years ago when I was an undergraduate, and I took a course in play therapy. And those of you who know about it know that you bring a little child, and this was for little children, because you see, in adults, we can use language for therapy and we can talk our way into health. But with children, the natural way is to play. And so you bring a child into this room and you give them all the little things that they can act out in, and you say, let's see, let's talk, let's be together, let's share. And you can do it in action. And I have a little girl who was, the first time I'd ever worked with a child that young, she was 5 years old, and she did all kinds of incredible things. If you think 5-year-olds are not aware, thank goodness we're finding out that little infants in cribs know what's going on. And we can do, now we're talking big things like infant stimulation. You know, good mamas knew that years ago when they held them and they loved them and they rocked them and they bounced them and they threw them across the room, you know. Instead of, you know, leave them there and don't you spoil them and don't you touch them and so on and so forth. But anyway, Leilani was going through a lot of things, and for several days she was doing something that really was bothering me. She was getting little pieces of clay and she was rolling them up into three little snowmen, and then after she had them all built, she'd go, pow! And she'd say, Mommy! And then she'd do another one, and she'd go, pow, and she'd say, Daddy. She'd go to her whole family, banging on the way, and then she'd want me to do it. And so being a very terrible child therapist, really awful, because I was so involved with these kids, and I was supposed to be there just reflecting. Oh, Leilani smashed her mother. I just couldn't do that, and I felt sort of involvement, and I said, Leilani, how come you're smashing all the people you love? And she looked at me, sort of indignantly, like, you jerk. And she said, because those are the people that are always hurting me. 5 years old. And then, again, being a very bad therapist, I said, but I love you and I don't hurt you. And she says, that's because you're crazy. 5 years old, and she'd already learned that love can be painful. And 5 years old, and she'd already learned that unconditional love, you must be crazy. And since then, I've done a lot of adult talk shows, and we're not too far away from that even now. The phone rings, and I say, hi, and this person says, hey, Biscaglia, where is this thing called love? I live in a little apartment house on Melrose, and I'm all alone. And I don't have the guts or the knowledge about how to break out. Where is it? And so, it doesn't bother me then to go someplace and say, let's talk about love, I don't care. And if you think I'm crazy, that's wonderful, because, when you think I'm crazy, that gives me lots of leeway for behavior. I can do almost anything, and you say, oh, that's you just crazy, Biscaglia. But I'm going to share some not so crazy statistics about love that kind of frighten me, and I hope they frighten you. Maybe that's why you're here tonight, too. And that is, do you know that there are about 8,000 suicides in the United States per year? Oh, especially for someone like me that thinks the greatest loss in the world is loss of human potential. I want to scream and say, hey, wait a minute! Don't you know that there are other alternatives? And do you know that many of those suicides are people who are over the age of 65? And maybe that tells us a little bit about the way we treat people who are old, and how we feel about them, and how we really we're a society that detests anything old. We don't want it around. We tear it down. We send it away so we don't have to look at it, instead of bringing it in and realizing that those people who have lost a sense of history are going to have to relive it themselves. And one of these days you're going to be there, as young and lovely and gorgeous as you are. And unless we do something about it right now, you're going to be stashed away someplace too. And it also about
Your body changes over 500 times a day, which can create embarrassing, over-causing sweat. Secret clinical study with adapts in response to